In today's video, we're going to be talking about the 12 principles of animation, and we're going to be using one of my favorite drawing and painting apps, Procreate, to do it. Hello, my name is Brad. I review tech for creative professionals. Today, we're talking about the 12 principles of animation. Now, I do want to say a disclaimer before we get started into the video. This is part of my larger Procreate animation course, which is available on Udemy. This is one section where we talk about those 12 principles of animation. If you want a discount code for the full course, you can see that down below in the description. I'll put a link on the screen. Anyway, that's it. Let's get on to the video. In this section, we are going to be talking about the 12 principles of animation. This is going to be our foundation that we build on because, you know, just playing this video, moving this ball across the screen is great. Yay, we've made an animation, but it's not exciting. It doesn't have energy or a sense of weight, a sense of realism. It's just a circle moving across the page. The purpose of these 12 basic animation principles that were introduced by Disney animators Ollie Johnson and Frank Thomas in their 1981 book, The Illusion of Life, is to do that, create an illusion of life for our animations. And so I'm going to be going over how we can take this simple little circle moving across the page and use some of these 12 principles to give this little circle the illusion of life. Now we're going to be going through these one by one. In this lesson, you don't have to recreate each one of these examples as I go through it. In the future lessons, we're going to be walking through in detail how a lot of this is done and how we're going to do it in Procreate. But right now, I just want you to kind of absorb this knowledge because these are the principles we're going to be using. I'm going to be referencing back to them. But at first, I wanted to introduce them to you and just walk you through them and show what they do before I have you actually creating some things in future lessons. So with that said, let's start in with this first principle, which is called slow in and slow out. If you're riding on a bike, you need to build up momentum on the bike. For example, this circle moves at a steady pace across the page, back and forth. But anything with any kind of movement starts off slow, gains momentum, has its max speed for a while, and then when you stop it, it just doesn't stop on a dime. No, it takes some time to actually stop a moving object. That's what slow in and out is designed to do. So the circles up here at top are equally distant. I've drawn these little lines to show the center point of all the circles, and you can see it's the same amount of distance between each one. Let me toggle on another group here so you can see my next group of circles. And what I've done here is I've staggered those points. So there's less space here, so it's not moving as fast here, and there's more space in the middle, so it's moving even faster. Let me hit play, and you can see for yourself how this changes. We have this kind of more fluid feeling as it slows at the edges and speeds up in the middle. So just by adding this one simple principle, you can see this is a much more realistic looking animation than the one at the top where everything is moving along the same spaced out lines. So that is slow in and slow out. And the next thing I want to talk about is something called squash and stretch. Now the idea here is to take our boring circle and give it some weight, kind of like a ball. If you think of a really soft ball, if you kick it, what is it going to do? It's going to indent a little bit. It's going to get smushed a little bit. Or if it bounces against the wall or bounces across against the ground, what's it going to do? It's going to smush down. And that's exactly what's happening as it hits the sides here. And then as it gains momentum, we're exaggerating that. We're stretching that out and pushing it down a little bit so it's not a perfect circle. So let me go ahead and hit play and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So what we've done here is we've mixed squash and stretch, where it's stretching in the middle and squashing it on the ends, with our idea of slow in and out, where we're pacing this out a little bit. And you can already see we have a much more realistic looking animation than we have along the top. Our third principle is anticipation. Now, when you think about a baseball player throwing a ball, what do? They pull their hand way back. They're winding up to throw the pitch, and then they release. That wind up, that pullback, that is anticipation. And by using that in animation, it means that our ball isn't just going to shoot forward when we throw it. Instead, we're going to kind of telegraph to the viewer, hey, this ball is about to do something. And by adding that little bit of exaggeration, that pullback, it really anticipates the coming animation. So in order to do that, I'm just gonna go through these frames. So next frame, it's gonna pull back a little bit. I'm also squashing and stretching it a little bit, but you saw it moved a little to the side. The next frame does it again, moves back to the side. Again, moves back, squashes even more. I made it kind of a bean shape, but I just keep doing that. And then on the next frame, what do? Boom, it shoots forward really quickly. The next frame, more squash and stretch. I've made it really elongated. And the next frame, it's off the frame. And then I added a couple blank frames at the end. So let me zoom out so you can see it. And we're gonna go ahead and hit play and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. That anticipation, that pull back, then shoot forward. Pull back, shoot forward. Pull back, shoot forward. That's anticipation. And right now it's set at a pretty low frames per second, but if we move it back, you can see the speed and how that tiny little anticipation, those couple extra frames, can add a lot to this animation. Principle number 4 is staging. This is the idea that your character should have a super clear pose or action. So if this ball was a little character instead of a ball, I gave him some arms, some legs, a gigantic eye, and a beak. It should be clear just looking at a still frame what this character is doing. The character is standing, the character is jumping, the character is flying. A big part of animation is just showing the viewer what's going on. And this leads us really well into the next principle of animation, which is pose to pose. So one of my character's poses might be standing still, and another one of those poses might be flying. And so what we want to do is we want to define those poses and we want to animate the in-betweens. So we figure out what those core poses are and then we figure out what goes in the middle. So I'll turn on the onion skinning so you can see there's going to be some anticipation and then he's going to shoot forward, he's going to jump forward. So let's go ahead and I'm going to hit play. Anticipation, jump, anticipation, jump, anticipation, jump. Our next principle is arcs. Motion that goes in a straight line can look unnatural. So moving in a slight arc or even a major arc can really help your animation look a little more natural. Circular motions can really help with realism. And you see this all the time. For example, if I just move my wrist, what's that doing? That's not moving in a straight line, that's moving in an arc. If I pivot from my elbow, it's gonna do the same thing. It's gonna be an arc. If a hand is waving, what does it do? It goes in a slight arc. It doesn't go up and down. It just looks unnatural. So adding arcs to your movement is a great way to add a little bit extra to your animations, add a little bit more realism to it as well. Next up, I want to talk about follow through, and that is extra animation that you add at the end of your primary animation to give it a little bit more personality. So example, if this guy jumps in, I add a little bit of follow through of the hair swishing. So the primary action is over, but the secondary action of that hair moving a little bit after it comes to a standstill helps add a little something to the character. This really leads us into the next principle, which is secondary action. In this case, this little guy's hair moves, but then his eye blinks. That secondary action is added to the character. Part of what adds realism to a scene is maybe something is moving in the background or the character shuffles their shoulders. You have to think of your character as an actor in the scene. Oftentimes what separates amateur animation from professional animation is maybe your character walks in and their mouth starts moving and they start talking. But where's that secondary animation? Maybe when they're talking, they shift their shoulders, they lean back a little bit, their eyes blink, they touch their hair. Those secondary animations can really help add life to the primary thing that you're trying to communicate in your scene. Our next principle is timing, and timing has to do with, of course, timing, the speed at which things move. So obviously, the faster something moves, the less frames it's going to take to move that across your stage. So in this case, this guy moves pretty fast. But if I wanted to, I could come in here and I could say, I want to duplicate that frame. I'm going to grab my arrow tool here and I'm going to move that right there. And then maybe we duplicate another frame. We'll take that next frame, we'll tap on it, we'll duplicate it, and I'll grab that. And what's this going to do? This is going to slow down that flying movement. It's going to seem like a very different animation just by adding 2 extra frames of animation in between. So we'll go ahead and hit play. Now he's just kind of flying away subtly. He's not flying away quick. It's just more of a subtle boop, I'm flying away. If I added more frames in between, it'd become even more subtle. That sort of timing in your animation is either going to show urgency, the lack of urgency, If a character moves too fast, that character might be seen as twitchy. If that character moves too slow, it might seem sloth-like. Sometimes those animations are intentional and good and can show personality, and sometimes they can be unfortunate and unwanted, so it's something to be aware of. Our next principle is exaggeration, and whenever I hear this one, I think of the genie from the Disney movie Aladdin. That is like the peak of exaggerated animation effects. He doesn't just talk, his arms are everywhere, his mouth is wide open, his eyes are big and expressive. So even with the simple character, instead of just changing the eyebrows to say, "Oh, I'm surprised," you really want to exaggerate that to get your point across. That's exaggeration in characters, especially in animation. You're not really going for a super realistic point of view. I might move my hand subtly while I'm explaining something, but in an animation, you're going to really want to exaggerate that movements to emphasize it. Our next principle is solid drawing. Now, this is a weird one because what is solid drawing? It's basically getting better at art. But I do want to point out a couple things here. It's not just getting better at art, because we're going to be going over some things in this course that are actually going to improve your solid drawing skills, even though I'm not going to be teaching you how to draw a chair or a tiger or that sort of thing. I am going to be going over some of the little things that can really help your animation. So for example, in this character, part of solid drawing is that as he moves, the thickness of his beak has to be consistent across all these frames. You don't want your character changing. The width of the rim around his eye, it should be consistent from frame to frame, right? The position of where his arms are should make sense. Solid drawing isn't just how realistically you can draw something, it's how consistently you can draw something. And there is draftsmanship to that, and we're going to be talking about draftsmanship in its own section in this course, just so you can kind of understand some of the pitfalls that you're going to fall into when you start animating, when you start drawing, and some of the things that are going to help your draftsmanship, which will in turn really help your animations look more professional. And our final principle here, principle number 12, is appeal. These are Disney's rules after all. So you want to make characters that people like, that they can relate to. It's that drama that really helps us tell that story. So even in a simple animation, you can do a lot. I mean, look at the opening of any Pixar movie. Where does it start with the logo and the lamp jumping in? It's a lamp, but they make that lamp likable. They give that lamp appeal. So those are our 12 principles of animation that we're going to be using throughout this course. And that's it. If you have any comments or questions, let me know down below. And of course, if you want to get the full course, head over to brad.site/learn. Check out the discount codes there. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days.